The signal pulsed through the void, a desperate cry flung into the abyss of space. Encoded within its ancient dialect was a singular message, one of terror, of finality. The Velari, once rulers of their own destiny, were being wiped from existence. Across the galactic expanse, powerful empires, indifferent to the suffering of others, received the distress call. Some analyzed it with idle curiosity before dismissing it. Others, fearing the wrath of the aggressors, chose silence. No one dared to interfere, no one except humanity. On the bridge of the UTS Aegis, Admiral David Holloway listened intently as the transmission played once more. The voice on the other end trembled, a deep, resonant tone from a species long thought untouchable. To any who will listen, we are the Velari. We beg for aid. Our home is under siege. Our people are dying. The Draksha have come, and there will be no survivors. Please, do not let our light go out. Silence hung in the control room of the United Terran Command's High Council, where the most powerful leaders of Earth's military and political factions had gathered. The Velari were not an unknown race. They were an ancient power, isolationist, and secretive, known for their superior technology and disdain for lesser species. And now, they were begging for help. The Draksha, on the other hand, were a nightmare wrapped in myth, an ancient scourge that appeared only when it was too late. Those who had fought them were now gone. Their tactics were horrifying. They consumed entire civilizations, assimilating organic and synthetic components into their endless swarm. The last recorded encounter with them had been centuries ago. The galaxy had hoped they were extinct. They were not. The debate, to fight or not to fight. The leaders of the United Terran Alliance argued fiercely. "This is not our war," said Chancellor Ilara Voss, her voice heavy with caution. "We are not ready for a conflict of this scale. We don't even know if the Velari would lift a finger for us if the roles were reversed." Across the table, General Ethan Hayes leaned forward, his gaze sharp as steel. "And if we do nothing? If we stand by while the Draksha exterminate an entire race? We could be next. You really want to gamble on their mercy?" The debate stretched into the night. Some feared retaliation. Others saw an opportunity, a chance to prove that humanity would not be just another footnote in the galaxy's history. And some, like Captain Dane Carter, saw it as something far simpler. "There's no debate," he said finally, his voice cutting through the noise. "They called for help. We answer. A decision that would shake the stars. In the end, history would remember the decision as humanity's defining moment. Earth's leaders voted. It was not unanimous, but it was final. Humanity would act. Not because they were the strongest, nor the most advanced, but because they would not stand by while others burned. Orders were given. The most powerful ships in the United Terran Navy were mobilized. Weapons were prepared, and alliances tested. In just a matter of days, a fleet was assembled, not of conquest, but of defiance. Among the chosen commanders, one name stood above the rest: Captain Dane Carter, a man who had survived battles that should have claimed his life a dozen times over. He did not fight for glory. He did not fight for vengeance. He fought because someone had to. As he stood aboard the UTS Valiant, watching as the fleet prepared for departure, he received one final message from Earth's leaders. "You are not just fighting for the Velari. You are fighting for all of us. Bring them fire. Bring them fury. And if the Draksha dare to stand against us, remind them why humanity endures." The fleet roared to life. Engines ignited. Cannons armed. The stars trembled as humanity answered the call. The United Terran Navy's war fleet surged into the abyss, a formation of steel titans cutting across the cold void of space. Their destination lay deep within Velari territory, a region few had ever dared to enter. For centuries, the Velari had kept their domain hidden behind layers of defensive perimeters, automated sentries, and coded silence. Yet now, all those barriers had crumbled, replaced by a singular plea for salvation. At the heart of the fleet, Aboard the UTS Valiant, Captain Dane Carter stood before the vast holomat, his sharp eyes locked onto the projected battlefield. The holographic representation of Velara Prime, the homeworld of the Velari, flickered before him, a once mighty jewel of the cosmos now engulfed in chaos. Fires raged across its continents. Entire cities blinked out like dying embers, and surrounding the planet like a tightening noose were the Draksha fleets, their grotesque, biomechanical warships shifting and pulsing as if alive. The Draksha did not build ships in the conventional sense. Their vessels were grown, organic nightmares fused with advanced technology, part living creature, part war machine. Their ships pulsed with eerie bioluminescence, tentacle-like appendages slithering through space, scanning for prey. The Hive fleet was vast, numbering in the thousands, each vessel more monstrous than the last. Carter exhaled slowly. His officers were silent, waiting for his word. "How long until we reach engagement range?" he asked. Commander Aisha Patel, his tactical officer, adjusted the fleet's trajectory. 26 minutes. Long-range scanners indicate multiple hostile formations moving into position. They know we're coming. "Let them know we don't scare easy," Carter said, his voice unwavering. "Raise the fleet-wide battle net. It's time." The fleet that defied the void. Across the human armada, captains, officers, and soldiers received their orders. The fleet was unlike any the galaxy had seen before, not because of its size, but because of what it represented. Humanity had not ventured into the stars as conquerors, nor had they established an empire through sheer might. They were survivors first and foremost, a species forged in struggle, tempered by centuries of conflict, innovation, and relentless perseverance. And now, they were bringing that fight to the Draksha. All ships, report status. Across the command network, captains responded in rapid succession. UTS Aegis, a dreadnought-class warship, bristling with railguns and planetary bombardment cannons. UTS Indomitable, a battleship renowned for its adaptive shielding and heavy plasma arrays. UTS Revenant, a stealth destroyer equipped with experimental cloaking tech designed to cripple enemy flagships. UTS Artemis, a carrier housing squadrons of cutting-edge exofighters, piloted by the best of Earth's ace squadrons. And dozens more, each a testament to Earth's resolve. In the heart of the Valiant's command deck, Carter opened the fleet-wide channel. Asterisk, this is Captain Carter. We are entering a battlefield where the galaxy has only ever known silence. The Draksha do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They consume. But today, they meet something they have never faced before. Us. We do not bow. We do not break. We stand as one, not because we seek war, but because we will not stand by and watch another race burn. The Velari thought themselves alone. They were wrong. The Draksha believe we will fall like all before us. They, too, are wrong. We do not come as conquerors. We come as fire. We come as fury. This ends today. A single moment of silence followed. Then, for Earth, for the VELR. The battle cry erupted across the fleet, shaking the very airwaves. Engines flared to life. Weapons primed. The fleet surged forward, accelerating toward the heart of the enemy. The void erupts in fire and blood. The Draksha warships reacted immediately, their hive mind responding to the sudden incursion. From the depths of their biomechanical hulls, they released swarms of living missiles, each a grotesque fusion of flesh and metal. The human fleet answered in kind. Railguns ignited, plasma lances slashed across the darkness, kinetic warheads thundered forward. The first wave of Draksha interceptors screeched toward the advancing Terran squadrons. Their fighters were organic constructs, undulating through space like monstrous predatory fish. As they closed the distance, they opened their maws, releasing streams of acidic energy, their weapons designed to corrode through metal and flesh alike. But they had never faced Terran fighter pilots before. From the UTS Artemis, Earth's most elite squadrons deployed. Sleek, angular exofighters with adaptive shielding and high-speed maneuvering thrusters. At their lead was Lieutenant Jace Harper, a veteran pilot who had flown through more hellscapes than most had ever imagined. All wings, break formation, engage at will. The battle unfolded like a storm of death and fury. Human fighters weaved between enemy squadrons, unleashing rotary plasma cannons and AI-guided torpedoes. They fought not with overwhelming numbers, but with superior tactics and precision strikes. In the distance, the UTS Aegis fired its first main salvo. A kinetic warhead, moving at near-relativistic speeds, slammed into a Draksha battleship. The enemy vessel ruptured as the impact shattered its biomass hull, sending fragments of writhing organic matter into the void. More explosions followed. Plasma bolts, missile swarms, and pulse rounds lit up the battlefield. Terran warships adapted with every second, shifting formations, coordinating counterstrikes. The Draksha, for all their overwhelming numbers, were not prepared for an enemy that could learn, adapt, and retaliate with such brutal efficiency. The Villari, watching from their beleaguered homeworld, had expected humanity to arrive as little more than a delaying force, a token effort before the inevitable end. But as the first Draksha capital ships exploded in brilliant cascades of fire and debris, as human forces tore through their supposedly unstoppable swarms, the Villari saw something else entirely. They saw the impossible. They saw the first true resistance against the Draksha. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy realized that humanity was not just another species to be ignored. They were something else. Something terrifying. Something unstoppable. The battlefield was no longer just a clash of fleets. It was a maelstrom of destruction, a war of fire and blood where steel met flesh, where alien monstrosities clashed against the ingenuity of humankind. From orbit, Velara Prime was a world on the edge of annihilation. The once proud cities of the Villari, adorned with crystalline spires and luminous waterways, were now battlefields, their structures crumbling beneath the relentless bombardment of the Draksha High Fleet. Their defenses had been shattered days ago. Their armies were exhausted, their war machines running on fumes. And then, humanity arrived. The sky above Velara ignited as the first Terran warships punched through the upper atmosphere, their cannons roaring to life, vaporizing Draksha orbital platforms in successive firestorms. The air itself trembled as kinetic rail slugs, each the size of a building, tore through the void, smashing into enemy carriers with terrifying force. Captain Dane Carter stood on the command bridge of the UTS Valiant, his eyes locked onto the chaotic holomap before him. The battle was unfolding in real time, a dance of maneuvering fleets, desperate dogfights, and colossal warships unleashing devastation upon one another. Beside him, Commander Aisha Patel, ever sharp-eyed and calculating, relayed the latest tactical updates. Enemy capital ships are forming a counteroffensive along the eastern hemisphere. The Villari defensive line is failing. Ground forces are reporting massive breaches. Carter clenched his jaw. We break their fleet now, or the planet falls. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All capital ships, form up on my signal. We're cutting through their lines. I want every railgun, every plasma lance, and every missile locked on their command vessels. Across the Armada, Terran captains acknowledged. The strategy was brutal, but necessary. The spear of humanity, the UTS Aegis, a behemoth of a dreadnought, took point, its massive form cutting through the wreckage of fallen ships. Alongside it, battlecruisers and destroyers flanked its sides, forming an unstoppable wedge aimed directly at the Draksha primary warhost. The Draksha, a species driven by predatory instinct, responded as they always had, by overwhelming their prey with sheer numbers. Their hive ships twisted and pulsed, releasing swarms of organic interceptors, each one a grotesque fusion of hardened bone and pulsing bioluminescent tissue. All fighters, defensive formation. Keep them off our capital ships. Lieutenant Jace Harper, leading the exofighter squadrons, pushed his throttle to full, his fighter roaring through the chaos. His HUD was alight with targeting warnings, dozens of Draksha interceptors closing fast. Unlike Terran fighters, which relied on maneuverability and firepower, these creatures were alive, driven by primal hunger. Harper smirked. "Let's see how you handle this." He twisted his fighter into a barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a stream of acidic projectiles, before snapping back and unleashing a burst of plasma rounds. The nearest Draksha fighter shrieked as the shots tore through its chitinous armor, sending it into a flaming spiral. All across the fleet, the battle raged. The UTS Revenant, a stealth destroyer, maneuvered through the wreckage of the battlefield, its experimental cloaking field shimmering as it drifted undetected. Inside, Commander Elias Voss, a hardened veteran of countless battles, watched his targeting screen. Their command ships are issuing coordinated signals. If we take out their leaders, the rest will falter. A silent nod from his weapons officer, and the Revenant fired a barrage of disruptor torpedoes. The warheads ripped through the void, slipping past enemy defenses before detonating within the Draksha flagship's central neural hub. The enemy warship convulsed violently, its biomassive hull writhing in agony before splitting apart in a series of explosions. The Hive fleet shuddered, their cohesion wavering. On the Valiant, Carter saw the shift. The Hive mind was weakening. "Now's our chance." He turned to Patel. "Deploy the Helljumpers, the warriors who fell from the sky." From the lower hangars of the UTS Valiant, massive drop pods lined the deployment bays. Within each, Terran shock troopers stood ready, men and women clad in advanced exo-armor, their weapons primed, their mission clear. "Helljumpers, listen up," came the voice of Colonel Adrian Wolfe, their commander. "This isn't a rescue mission. This isn't a counteroffensive. This is an extermination order. The Draksha do not negotiate, and neither do we." The troopers secured their weapons. "We're dropping into the deadliest battlefield this war has seen. If you're looking for mercy, you won't find it here." The drop bay alarms blared. The pods locked into launch positions. "We do this for Earth. We do this for the Velari." The launch command was given. And the Helljumpers fell. Thousands of drop pods descended through the burning sky, streaking past blazing wreckage, dodging Draksha artillery fire, and slamming into the surface of the Lara Prime. The first pods struck the ground like meteors, hatches bursting open as Terran shock troopers surged into the fray. The battle for Alara had truly begun. Velara's last stand. The ground war was a nightmare. The Draksha ground forces were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were walking nightmares, towering biotitans bred for planetary extermination. The Velari, already weakened, could do little more than fight in desperation. Their energy lances and grav tanks held the lines where they could, but against the Draksha, they were outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly broken. And then, the Helljumpers arrived. From the ruins of the Velari capital, survivors watched as armored Terran soldiers emerged from their drop pods, wielding pulse rifles, incendiary cannons, and experimental grav hammers. One Velari commander, his voice filled with disbelief, whispered, "They came." The Draksha turned their monstrous forms toward the newcomers, their chitinous mandibles clicking in recognition. And then, the humans opened fire. The battlefield erupted in chaos. Incendiary rounds ignited enemy flesh, plasma bolts seared through armored carapaces, and shock grenades shattered entire Draksha formations. Mechs, equipped with jewel-mounted railguns, stomped across the field, unleashing destruction. Colonel Wolfe, leading from the front, raised his rifle. "For Earth, for Velaara." The Helljumpers charge. The Velari, their spirits reignited by the unrelenting fury of humanity, rallied behind them. And for the first time, the Draksha, the apex predators of the void, felt fear. The battlefield was no longer a clash between armies. It was a war of annihilation. Villara Prime burned beneath a sky choked with fire and falling wreckage. The Draksha, those towering nightmares of flesh and bone, had turned the once thriving Velari homeworld into a slaughterhouse. Cities reduced to rubble. Skies darkened with smoke, the scent of charred flesh thick in the air. And yet, despite their cruelty, despite their overwhelming numbers, they were losing. The humans had arrived. The Helljumpers, the elite Terran shock troopers, fought with a savagery the galaxy had never seen. Their power armor bristled with advanced shielding, their weapons engineered for mass destruction. Plasma rifles, incendiary grenades, high-impact railguns, every tool of war designed with a single purpose: absolute extermination. They moved through the battlefield like living titans, bullets pinging harmlessly off their armor as they cut down Draksha warriors with merciless efficiency. Colonel Adrian Wolf, his blackened armor smeared with Draksha blood, led the charge. "Keep moving. We take the capital, or we die trying." The streets of Velari Prime were a war zone, littered with the corpses of both invaders and defenders. The remaining Velari warriors, exhausted and battle-worn, could barely hold their weapons. But as the shock troopers tore through the Draksha with ruthless precision, the survivors found hope. They saw something that had never happened before. The Draksha, the apex predators of the void, the creatures that had enslaved and devoured entire civilizations for millennia, were retreating. A towering Draksha warlord, its chitinous plating adorned with the skulls of past conquests, roared in frustration. It stood nearly 15 feet tall, its massive clawed arms capable of tearing through tank armor with ease. It had been bred for war, engineered for destruction. And yet, in that moment, as its forces were cut down by human railguns and burning plasma, it felt something unfamiliar creep into its mind: doubt. A squad of Helljumpers advanced, their heavy footfalls sending tremors through the ground. Their leader, Sergeant Dean Harris, raised his pulse rifle, his voice a snarl through his helmet's external speakers. "Come on, then, you ugly bastard. Show me what you've got." The warlord screeched, lunging forward with terrifying speed. But it was too slow. Harris squeezed the trigger. A burst of high-velocity plasma rounds flammed into the beast's chest, melting armor, searing flesh. The warlord staggered but did not fall. Its mandibles snapped open, releasing a horrifying ultrasonic scream, shattering windows, and sending weaker Velari warriors collapsing in agony. The Helljumpers didn't even flinch. A second burst from Harris' rifle punched through the warlord's skull, splitting it open like a ruptured fruit. The creature collapsed, its lifeblood steaming against the scorched ground. The other Draksha warriors hesitated. The humans did not. They surged forward, weapons blazing, cutting through the alien ranks like unstoppable reapers. The Draksha had never faced an enemy like this before, and they had never known true fear until now. Above the battlefield, Captain Dane Carter watched from orbit, his hands tightening into fists as the reports came in. The humans were winning. The Draksha fleet, once an unstoppable armada, was shattered. The UTS Valiant had led the charge, its powerful railguns tearing through enemy capital ships, while the stealth destroyer Revenant had silently assassinated key command vessels. Now, the last remnants of the Hive fleet were in full retreat, their surviving warships breaking formation, warping away to the outer edges of the system. Cowards. Commander Aisha Patel, ever the pragmatist, frowned at her tactical display. "They're running, but not for long. We should pursue, wipe them out before they regroup." Carter shook his head. "No, we let them go." Patel blinked. "Sir." He exhaled slowly. "Let them live. Let them crawl back to whatever hell they came from. Let them tell the others what happened here. Let the entire galaxy know what happens when you cross humanity." A slow smile spread across Patel's face. "Understood, sir." On the surface, the final Draksha warriors fell. The last remnants of their army were either dead or fleeing into the wilderness. Villara Prime had been saved. In the ruined streets of their capital, the remaining Velari gathered, staring in awe at their human saviors. One of them, a high-ranking Velari elder, stepped forward. His voice trembled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Why? Why did you save us?" Colonel Wolf removed his helmet, revealing a scared face and tired eyes. He exhaled. "Because we could." A silence stretched between them. Then, the Velari knelt. Across the ruined city, survivors dropped to their knees, bowing before the humans. Wolf stiffened. "No, we're not your gods." The elder looked up, shaking his head. "No, you are not gods." His voice was filled with something deeper, something unshakable. "You are worse. You are what the gods fear." And for the first time, across the shattered remains of Vellara Prime, the name of their saviors was spoken with reverence and fear alike. The humans. The word would spread. It would reach the ears of every species in the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived. And the stars would never be the same. The battlefield lay silent. The war had raged for days, and now, the last echoes of battle had faded into the smoke-filled air. The once thriving cities of Vellara Prime were left in ruins, their towering spires shattered, their crystalline streets reduced to rubble. Fires still smoldered where Draksha war beasts had rampaged, and the scent of burnt flesh and scorched metal lingered like a ghost. But amid the devastation, there was victory. Humanity had answered the Velari's desperate plea, and they had answered with fire and fury. Colonel Adrian Wolf surveyed the aftermath from atop a collapsed structure that had once been a palace. His blackened armor was dented and scarred, smeared with the blood of the enemy. His pulse rifle, its power core nearly spent, hung loosely in his grip. Around him, his helljumpers moved with calculated precision, securing the area, tending to the wounded, and ensuring no Draksha were left alive. His comms crackled. "Colonel Wolf, this is Fleet Command. We're reading mass enemy retreat. Confirming ground forces have secured the capital." Wolf exhaled. He scanned the war-torn landscape. The dead lay in mountains. Draksha corpses, once the nightmare of the galaxy, now lay in heaps, their monstrous forms twisted in death. A fitting fate. He pressed a bloodied gauntlet to his earpiece. "Vellara Prime is ours." A pause. Then, over the line, came Captain Dane Carter's voice, cold and unwavering. "Good. I want a full report on casualties and remaining hostiles." Wolf gave a nod, though he knew Carter couldn't see it. "Understood, sir. But there's something you need to know." A breath. A heavy silence. Then, the Velari. They're bowing. The scene stretched across the ruined capital like a tide. The surviving Velari, once proud and noble, had fallen to their knees. They knelt in the blood-stained streets, their luminous eyes filled with something that wasn't just gratitude. It was reverence. Awe. Fear. They had known the Draksha as predators, as nightmares lurking in the void, tearing through civilizations like a force of nature. And yet, the humans had destroyed them. Not just defeated them, destroyed them. The Velari elder, his silvered crest shimmering beneath the smoke-filled sky, approached Wolf, his frail form trembling. He studied the human commander as though he were something beyond comprehension. Then, slowly, he lowered himself into a deep bow. "We are in your debt," the elder said, his voice raw with emotion. "Tell us, what tribute would humanity ask of us?" Wolf stiffened. He turned his gaze to his troops. The helljumpers stood silent, their visors reflecting the kneeling Velari. There was no arrogance in their postures, no satisfaction in their stance, because humanity had never fought for tribute. Wolf's voice was quiet but firm. "We didn't come for tribute." The elder's crest twitched in confusion. "Then, why?" Wolf met his gaze. "Because we don't let monsters win." The Velari whispered among themselves, their glances flickering between the blood-soaked humans, and the remains of their conquerors. They had seen empires fall before. They had witnessed entire species kneel before the Draksha, broken and enslaved. They had heard the stories of civilizations vanishing overnight, consumed by the predators of the dark. But never had they seen a species who refused to bend. Never had they seen warriors who would rather burn the stars to ashes than let tyranny stand. And now the humans stood atop the wreckage of a once invincible empire, and the galaxy would never be the same. High above, aboard the UTS Valiant, Captain Dane Carter watched the unfolding scene on the surface through the ship's holodisplays. The sight of an entire species kneeling before human soldiers sent a strange shiver through his spine. It wasn't victory that unsettled him. It was the implications. Commander Aisha Patel stepped beside him, arms crossed. "They think we're gods," she murmured. Carter exhaled through his nose. No, his eyes remained fixed on the screen. "They think we're something worse." A silence stretched between them. Then Patel tapped at her console, shifting the display to focus on the remaining Draksha ships fleeing the system. "Should we pursue?" Carter didn't answer right away. He studied the data. The Draksha weren't retreating in formation. They weren't regrouping. They were scattering, like prey. The great predators of the void had met a force greater than them, and now, for the first time in their species' history, they were running. Carter clenched his jaw. "Let them go." The words formed in his mind, but he hesitated. If they let the Draksha flee, they would spread the story of their defeat, the story of humanity. And what would that do? Would it serve as a warning? Or would it make them something worse? Did it even matter? Patel was still watching him, waiting. Finally, Carter made his decision. No pursuit. Let them run. Patel didn't argue. She only gave a slow nod. "Understood, sir." On the surface, the humans began their withdrawal. The Velari watched as their saviors gathered their wounded, loaded their war machines back into their dropships, and prepared to leave the world they had just saved. One Velari warrior, younger than the others, stepped forward. "You are leaving." Colonel Wolf turned, meeting the Velari's gaze. "Our job is done." The warrior hesitated. Then, taking a breath, he asked, "What will you do now?" Wolf didn't answer right away. He looked toward the sky, where the Terran fleet hovered like silent sentinels over a broken world. Then, finally, he spoke. "We go home." The Velari warrior frowned. "And if the Draksha return?" Wolf's lips curled into a grim smile. "Then so will we." The Velari exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The elder took a step forward, his voice quiet, but filled with conviction. "No, you do not understand." He lowered his gaze. "We are not asking for protection." His luminous eyes met Wolf's. "We are asking to stand beside you." Wolf's expression hardened. He looked at the kneeling Velari, at the broken city, at the remains of the war that should never have happened. And slowly he nodded. The message would spread. It would ripple across the void, carried by fleeing Draksha survivors, whispered through the diplomatic channels of the great empires, muttered in the dimly lit corridors of war rooms. Humanity had answered the call. They had not come as conquerors. They had not come as saviors. They had come as something else. And now, every ruler, every warlord, every predator lurking in the depths of space would know one thing. When the weak cried out for help, humanity would come. And they would come with fire and fury. The stars bore witness to the fall of an empire. As the human warships withdrew from Velara Prime, the remnants of the Draksha fleet scattered into the void, fleeing toward the distant reaches of their once mighty dominion. But the void was not as welcoming as it had once been. Across the galactic expanse, the story spread like wildfire. The Draksha, the predators of the dark, had been humbled, beaten, routed, and the ones responsible, humanity. The name carried a weight it had never borne before. Worlds that had once feared the Draksha now whispered a single question among themselves. If the humans could bring down the galaxy's greatest predators, what else were they capable of? And in the cold halls of the Terran High Command, those very questions were being asked in whispers and shouts alike. Terran High Command, Military Council Chamber. The chamber was vast, built from obsidian steel, its towering walls adorned with banners of the United Terran Systems. Around a circular table sat the highest-ranking officers of humanity's military machine: fleet admirals, planetary generals, intelligence directors. In the center of them all stood Admiral Catherine Langley, Supreme Commander of the Terran Armada. She did not sit. She did not rest. Her gaze was locked on the holographic display before them, a full tactical breakdown of the Velara campaign. Glowing red symbols marked every destroyed Draksha vessel, every fallen battalion, every shattered warbeast. It was not a battle report. It was an obituary. Langley turned to the gathered officers. Her voice was sharp, unwavering. "I want assessments. Immediate." Admiral Kieran Holt, head of Fleet Logistics, leaned forward, arms crossed. "We won. Completely." His gaze flicked to Langley. "But I'm guessing you're not celebrating." Langley's lips pressed into a thin line. "No, Admiral, I'm not." Across the table, Director Elijah Crane of Terran Intelligence let out a slow breath. His cybernetic eye glowed faintly as he analyzed incoming data streams. "We shattered the Drakesha's power base," he admitted, "but we haven't erased them." Langley nodded grimly. "And now, they know fear." The words lingered in the air. For the first time in their history, the Draksha were not the hunters. They were the hunted. Crane folded his hands. "Our analysis suggests two possible outcomes. 1. The Draksha Empire collapses, consumed by infighting and rebellion. The species fragments into warbands, scattered across the void. Dangerous, but manageable." He exhaled. 2. They rally. His mechanical eye flickered. "And they come for us." Langley turned her gaze to General Marcus Voss, commander of the Terran ground forces. "If they retaliate, can we withstand them?" Voss grunted. "Depends on how they do it. If they send fleets, we have countermeasures. If they try subterfuge, intelligence can deal with it." He leaned forward. "But if they decide to do what we just did?" His fingers tapped against the table. "If they decide to wage total war?" A silence fell over the room. Langley clenched her jaw. "Then we make sure they never get the chance." Her eyes darkened. "If they want war, we end them." The Broken Empire. Draksha High War Council. Far beyond the shattered battlefields of Velara Prime, in the dark heart of Draksha territory, the High War Council convened. The chamber was lit only by flickering plasma torches, casting long shadows across the stone walls. The air reeked of blood. The council had been summoned not for discussion, but for retribution. At the head of the gathering stood Overlord Sar Kul, first Fang of the Draksha. His scales were scared, his talons sharpened to obsidian points. He had once been the architect of conquest. Now he was the last hope of a dying empire. The other warlords gathered around him, their eyes burning with rage and humiliation. "We underestimated them," Tarkul growled, his voice a deep, rumbling snarl. "We mistook them for prey." A younger warlord hissed. "And now they think themselves our equals." His claws raked against the stone table. "This cannot stand." The council roared in agreement. Pride and fury clashed in the air. But then, an elder Draksha, his scales dulled by age, spoke softly. "They are not our equals," he rasped. His golden eyes gleamed in the dim torchlight. "They are our betters." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Sarkul turned to the elder, his lips curling back into a sneer. "You would kneel before them." The elder bared his fangs. "No, I would understand them." He let the words settle before he continued. "We have warred for eons. We have crushed species beneath our heel. And yet, he leaned forward. Never have we faced warriors like them. A hush fell over the room. They do not fight for dominion. They do not fight for conquest. And yet they fight with the fury of the void itself. Zarkal's talons tightened into fists. He did not want to hear these words. But deep within his warrior's soul, he knew them to be true. The humans did not fight like prey. They fought like gods of war. The elder's voice lowered to a whisper. If we strike again, we risk extinction. Zarkal's nostrils flared. Then what do you propose? The elder bared his fangs in something that was not quite a smile. We watch, we learn. And when the time comes, his golden eyes gleamed. We strike where they least expect it. The gathering storm. Across the stars, the galaxy held its breath. The Draksha Empire was broken, but not defeated. They were watching, waiting. The Velari had found new faith in the humans, pledging their loyalty to those who had saved them. They would not be the last. And in the halls of Terran High Command, preparations were already underway. Humanity had won a battle, but they had not won the war. For the first time, the Void knew fear. And as the Terran fleets mobilized, as new alliances were forged in the fires of war, as the great predators of the dark nursed their wounds in silence, one thing became certain. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same. The stars had changed. It was not a physical shift, no cosmic upheaval, no stellar collapse, but something deeper, something that pulsed in the heart of every species that looked upon the void with fearful eyes. The great predators of the galaxy had been humbled, and humanity stood at the center of it all. But the war was not over. Not yet. Terran High Command, War Room. Admiral Catherine Langley stood before the massive holographic war map, watching as the stars flickered with movement. Red clusters marked the remnants of the Draksha fleets, scattered like wounded beasts across their former empire. But even wounded, they were still dangerous. Perhaps more dangerous than ever. Langley exhaled. They wouldn't attack outright. Not yet. No, the Draksha were too cunning for that. They had learned. They had felt humanity's wrath, had seen their fleets shattered, their warriors burned away in the cold void. And now they were watching, waiting. Her eyes narrowed. That couldn't be allowed to happen. Admiral, came a voice behind her. She turned to see Director Elijah Crane, the intelligence chief, standing with his hands behind his back. His cybernetic eye flickered as it processed incoming data. Langley gestured to the hologram. They're going to adapt. Crane nodded. They already have. His voice was flat, emotionless. Intercepted transmissions indicate a shift in their tactics. The surviving warlords aren't consolidating. They're vanishing. Entire fleets are going dark. No hyperwave transmissions, no heat signatures, nothing. Langley's fingers tightened into a fist. They weren't retreating. They were preparing. Crane leaned forward. We've seen this before. In primitive wars, back on Earth, when a dominant power crushes its enemy, the enemy doesn't always surrender. His cybernetic eye whirred as he studied the data. Sometimes they bleed in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Langley's voice was cold. Guerrilla warfare. Crane nodded. And the Draksha have perfected it over thousands of years. When they couldn't overwhelm a species, they hunted them. Silently, surgically. His metallic fingers tapped against the war table. They're turning our own strategy against us. Langley exhaled slowly. Then we have only one option. Crane studied her. Preemptive elimination. She turned, her gaze sharp. Total war. A long silence followed. Crane's lips curled into a grim smile. I'll start drawing up targets. The shadows stir. Across the void, the Draksha gathered in hidden places, on dying moons, deep in the gravity wells of forgotten worlds, within the wreckage of their fallen fleets. They did not weep. They did not mourn. Their species had been built on war, sculpted by the fires of slaughter. Defeat was not death, it was a lesson. And humanity had just taught them the deadliest lesson of all. Overlord Xarkal stood atop a jagged cliffside on a nameless world, watching as the remnants of his warriors sharpened their claws and reforged their weapons. His golden eyes gleamed beneath the dying sun. The elder beside him, the same one who had spoken of humanity with something resembling awe, stood in silence. Finally, Xarkal spoke. "You were right." The elder tilted his head. "I often am." Xarkal's claws flexed. "They do not fight like prey. They fight like us." The elder's lips curled. "No." His golden gaze locked onto the stars. "They fight like something greater." Xarkal's jaw tensed. He wanted to deny it, wanted to reject the thought outright. But deep in his soul, in the instincts passed down by generations of warlords before him, he knew it to be true. Humanity had done the impossible. They had fought the Draksha not as cornered prey, but as relentless, unyielding warriors. They had become predators of the void. And that meant only one thing. The Draksha had to evolve. Xarkal exhaled. The other warlords, will they follow? The elder let out a slow, rasping chuckle. They have no choice. He turned, his fangs glinting. If we cling to the old ways, we will die. If we remain as we are, we will fall. His golden eyes narrowed. But if we become something new, if we learn from our mistakes, from them, his voice lowered to a whisper, then we will return, and we will be stronger than ever. Xarkal clenched his fists. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday the Draksha would rise again. And when that day came, the galaxy would tremble once more. The final choice, back on Earth, in the silent halls of the United Terran Senate, humanity stood at a crossroads. Admiral Langley stood before the gathered leaders, her uniform pristine, her voice unwavering. "The war isn't over," she declared. "It won't be over until they're eradicated, not defeated, eliminated." Murmurs spread through the room. Some senators nodded in grim agreement. Others hesitated, their eyes uncertain. A voice rose from the council chamber. "You propose genocide." Langley's gaze was steel. "I propose survival." Silence. Then, another voice. "And what if we make peace?" A cold chuckle came from the side of the room. General Marcus Voss, the battle-hardened commander of Terran ground forces, shook his head. "You don't make peace with wolves. You either tame them, or you kill them." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. Langley took a step forward. "If we hesitate, they will return. Stronger, smarter, more ruthless than ever." Her eyes burned with conviction. "We have a choice. We strike now. We finish what we started. Or we wait, and we let the galaxy decide our fate for us." A long silence fell over the room. Then, slowly, one by one, the senators began to nod. The decision was made. Humanity would not wait for the enemy to return. Humanity would become the storm. The end of the beginning. The final Terran fleets departed from Sol's orbit, vanishing into the void like silver ghosts. They did not seek conquest. They did not seek glory. They sought finality. For too long, the Draksha had ruled the stars with blood and terror. Now it was humanity's turn. And in the depths of the void, beneath the silent watch of a billion distant suns, the final war began.